Before we start our next video, we'd like to invite you to stay to the end. We have something I know you're going to want to see. Welcome to Woodworking with Wes. We have a very special video for you today. We have been showing some the cerusing process on some golden oak doors from kitchen cabinets, showing you how you can update your kitchen. And we've had a lot of comments, and we appreciate those comments. We love the way you visit our channel, and we like your input. But one of the questions that we've had, and we've had it many times, is how would this cerusing process work on different kinds of wood? You might not have a golden oak kitchen. You might have a kitchen that is out of birch or maple or cherry, and you want to know how this cerusing process works on your wood. Well, today we're going to answer that question. What I did is I went through my wood pile and I found all the different kinds of wood that I use typically in my construction methods, and I made the same size piece of wood for each of my samples. I labeled them so we can see later on how they turn out. Now, to make sure that each one of our samples come out with the same process, we made our wood the same size, like I said, and we're going to do the same steps on each piece of wood all the way through so that we can see how they turn out different. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to texture with our Mitaka wheel sander. Now, you can wire brush if you want to on any of this to get your texture. I'm going to use the Mitaka wheel sander because I want to have the consistency to show in our sample cerusing processes. So let's go through. We're going to spend just a few minutes. We're going to put a texture on each one of these and then head to the paint shop. We've completed the texturing of all of our pieces now. We used about the same amount of time and the same pressure on each piece to try to keep this as even as possible. Like I say, next step, paint shop. Okay, I want to talk a little bit before we get ready to paint. I want to go over some of the things that we're going to be seeing in our paint shop. We're going to paint each one of these the exact same color. We're going to use a white vinyl primer. Now, we have demonstrated in some of our other videos that you can use a paintable primer. We're going to spray today. The main reason we're going to do everything the same is to highlight the differences in the grain appearance after the cerusing process. So keep that in mind, that we're doing everything exactly the same, and we're going to use white paint and black glaze because that gives us the greatest contrast between the paint and the glaze for our highlighting of our grain. So if you were doing this on your own, on a kitchen cabinet or a piece of furniture or anything like that, of course color choice is always yours. Many contrasting colors are very nice together. We're just doing black and white for the maximum contrast. Also, we're doing this on new wood. If you were doing a golden oak kitchen, or if you were doing any kind of piece of furniture that already had an existing finish on it, your wire brush or your texturing method would be strong enough to go through, break through some of the finish and highlight the grain. Because we're doing this on new wood, our grain will maybe be a little different. Don't get caught up in that. That's not what we're trying to show. We're just trying to show the difference between different types of wood in the same process, the same color, the same glaze, so we can highlight the differences. But let's go through now, paint everything white, and get ready for our glaze after that. We have sprayed all our samples with our white base color primer, and we're getting ready now to glaze. I'm going to just use a staining sponge to glaze. Because this is a flat surface and we don't have any crevices to get in, typically I glaze with a brush because we have profiles to work around and you've got to get in there and get all the glaze down the bottom. When we're just doing a flat surface, it's faster to go with just a standing sponge, and so we're going to do that. Let's go ahead and glaze these two and show you what we have going on here with our samples. You still have to rub your glaze good, get it down in the crevices, especially on the cerused wood or the textured wood that is got deep crevices, and make sure you get it in there like that. Then I wipe it up with my paper towel. Now this is a piece of oak that I'm working on right now, and you can see, as we have shown in our videos in the past, that oak is an excellent wood for this process. So let's set that there. Now this is a piece of cherry, and cherry was one of the woods that we thought in our other tests didn't do as well as far as really showing a distinct grain, and because that's a softer grain wood. Oak is a coarse grain wood, cherry is a softer grain wood. And see, we're just barely getting a little bit of grain there, almost not worth all of the work and effort. And we've done the same process on both pieces of wood. So you can see how much of a difference there is. Both pieces are the same size, both pieces were sanded first, then textured, painted with the exact same amount of paint, and glazed just like you watched me do. And you can see the difference. Different woods take this process much differently. We're going to go ahead and finish now our process by waiting for this to dry, sanding, and putting a top coat on. And we'll do that to all of our samples that we've done, and we'll show you how each sample turned out. While we're waiting for our glaze to dry, let's talk about the products that we used so that you know what we did. For our base color coat, we used Campbell primer sealer. Now, we have shown in videos in the past that to use other kinds of primer. We used a Sherwin-Williams primer that was a paintable primer. We have found that just about any kind of primer, if you want to put a primer on there, just make sure you've got a good primer coat, sand it smooth before you put your glaze on. So make sure you just have a good primer. The glaze that we have used is an oil base Campbell glaze. We're using white paint and black glaze like we talked about to highlight, get the highlight of our grain, the maximum that we could do. But paint, then glaze, and when we get all done, we're going to use a pre-catalyzed lacquer for our top coat. And today we just spread our glaze with a staining sponge. You can purchase these at your local paint supplier. And I sprayed this finish. You can paintbrush your primer and have that same application with a paintbrush or a roller. We just spray because we have the opportunity in the paint shop. But let's go ahead and get finished up now and see how we ended up. We've now completed the glaze part of our process. I'm going to have my videoer show you the pieces of wood. This is just paint and glaze. We still have one more step when we go through and sand our glaze and highlight our grain even more. But I wanted you to see this step of our process. Now we're going to sand and highlight that grain even more on the wood pieces that we've done. Get my glasses on here and let's get started. We'll talk about the types of wood that we have here. I'm not going to show you that right now. We're just going to sand off our glaze, and we're going to go right down the row here. And then we're going to talk about the different kinds of wood when we're all done, and whether or not we like what we ended up with. We're doing the same amount of sanding on each one of our samples so that when we get all done, every process that we've done on each piece is going to be exactly the same amount of work, same amount of paint, same amount of glaze, so that we can really compare what we've ended up with. We'll go ahead and complete this part and get ready to lacquer. We're back from the paint shop. We have our samples all done. Let's talk about them. Our first one is the red oak, and the red oak is what we've been using on our golden oak doors, and so you're very familiar with this ceruse and how it looks. So let's look at some of the other ones. This is a piece of cherry. We did get a nice soft looking grain, not as distinct as the red oak, but very nice. This is a piece of mahogany. Mahogany didn't do as well. It doesn't have a very distinct grain, kind of nondescript. Didn't care for it as much. This is a piece of white oak. Now, white oak and red oak are both oak trees, just different species. Like a silver leaf maple and a red leaf maple, red oak and white oak are different in that respect. Very nice distinct grain though in white oak. We like that also. This is a piece of alder. Alder is another soft grain wood, although we get a little bit of grain look to it, not very much. This is pine. I didn't care for pine. This is probably my least favorite. Well, pretty close anyway. Didn't really turn out very well. We had some sand throughs when we were sanding our white paint. Didn't really like that as well. This is poplar. Poplar is a utility wood that we use on our paint grade woods. When we do a paint grade door, we've often built those out of poplar. A little bit of grain showing, not too bad. This is probably my favorite. This is ash. Ash has a very distinct grain, nice color to it on the natural wood, but it has a beautiful look on the ceruse. This is one that kind of surprised me, hickory. Hickory is another coarse grain wood, and I was expecting it to ceruse very nice, but it has a real nice look. I really enjoyed it. This is also one that surprised me. This is walnut. And walnut I didn't expect to do very well, but it did real well. It's got a very heavy glaze look to it, but a nice grain pattern nonetheless. And here's maple. Maple didn't do well at all. Almost no grain showing. Very plain looking. Didn't ceruse very well. Now, I want to show you something. At the very beginning of our video, we talked about something that you'd like to see at the end. Let's go back to our alder. And alder had a fairly nice ceruse, but nothing distinct. I want to show you something. This is also alder that has been cerused. A little different in its process, but it's the same kind of distinct grain showing through that we were looking for in some of our woods. We're going to do an upcoming video showing how this particular door was done and show you the exact process that you could end up with a beautiful door just like this. And we're going to see you then when we demonstrate this on woodworking with Wes.